It's time to hammer.
Now I gotta really try hard.
Shut it down!
Somehow it's the best.
The YumChunks podcast.
YumChunks!
Hello, everyone. This is Sean Davis.
And this is Chris.
And you're listening to After the Credits, the podcast about movies, TV, video games, and whatever else pop culture we want to talk about this week. And guess what? It's only two of us today.
Two people.
We don't have all those other losers dragging us down.
That lives are too busy to just sit at home and finish video games.
Yeah. Today, it's just going to be Chris and myself. Specifically because we're going to be talking about a video game today, and we're the only ones who have played that game up to this point. Maybe they could do their own episode about this sometime in the future.
God of War Part 2.
2 years later.
Only Vince and Chewie.
Yeah, Ryan
never gets around.
Ryan will have his own single person podcast about it. So yes, we're going to be talking about the new God of War video game from Santa Monica Studios. Chris and I have both played through it, and we have a lot to say about it, and we thought it'd be a fun episode to do. So, yeah, if you don't like video games or care about God of War, you better still listen. You need to broaden your horizons, people. It's not all Avengers and candy.
And quiet places and solos and
yes, exactly. But anyways, before we get to that, we thought we'd kind of mention a couple of things that we're actually looking forward to on the gaming scene coming out in the next on the horizon in the next couple months. We're both pretty avid gamers, so we like to keep up on the pulse of gaming and some of the stuff that we're interested in. Chris, what do you got? What do you got your eyes on?
Well, my eyes are currently on Detroit.
Oh yeah,
the city, not the
just
game.
Unrelated.
The city on a map. Market. I'm just looking at Detroit on a map right now.
Have you started playing it?
Yeah, I'm a pretty good way through it. I'm really enjoying it.
Really?
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, I haven't started yet. I will start it soon. At the time of recording. So.
I'd like to do another episode about that once we get through it. But overall, it's a really pretty game. The facial animations and the way they look, the graphics and stuff, it's really good. It also seems so far like that Quantic Dreams has avoided the normal performance issues that they usually encountered. Like I haven't really had any issues with frame rate dips or anything like that. So overall, it's a really good time, a really good story so far.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I've only just kind of heard people talking and read some reviews, and while the reviews have been pretty mixed, there's nothing surprising about them for me. Like a lot of it's what I expected from Quantic Dreams and kind of David Cage. For better and worse, so I'm definitely still interested and we'll play it once.
I mean, without going too far into it, I do see a lot of why people are mixed on it.
Mm-hmm.
The story is very ham-fisted, you know?
Yeah,
it's like, right off the bat, I was like, I see where you're going with this. Subtlety. It's a word, David.
Yeah.
Look it up.
So, yeah, that's something on my radar.
And then there's E3 is in a couple
of
weeks,
game,
actually.
E3, the video game.
The E3 video game, where it's actually a little cell phone game where you go to E3 and you walk around and wait.
You wait in lines, yeah, and you pay if you want to do microtransactions, and you could cut in line and get.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, E3 is coming up in a couple months. I know.
Couple weeks.
Well, oh yeah. Well, yeah, like a week or two. Less than 2 weeks.
June 12th?
Yep, June 12th, 13th, 14th. Both of us will be attending, so that should be a lot of fun. I'm actually going to be working it myself, so hopefully I'll get a chance to check out some of the demos and what other people are showing off between my shifts. And who knows, maybe we'll do an episode about E3.
The reason I bring that up, though, is because the game that I am most looking forward to for the rest of the year has been confirmed as having a presence there, which is big news that Kingdom Hearts 3 will be playable on the floor.
What is this Kingdom Hearts 3 you speak of?
Well, it comes after Kingdom
Hearts. What is Kingdom Hearts, Chris?
It's light, Sean.
Oh.
It's light.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, I'm definitely excited for that too. And that's another one we might do an episode on. But man, do you think it's gonna live up to everything that expectations isn't even the right word? It's more than just expectations.
It's been well over a decade since 2 came out.
Mm-hmm.
I think for people who are fans of the series, it will have no problem delivering to them. However, for people that weren't a part of the series that are hoping like, I'm going to get 3 when it comes out because it's whatever, it's going to have a hard time meeting expectations to those people.
Maybe. What about the people who are more casual? So the people who haven't played the 65 intermediary Kingdom Hearts fraction decimal Roman numerals.
Final chapter prologue.
Yeah, that they maybe just played Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 because they've been numbered and like, oh, I remember that game. That was a lot of fun.
I'm sure it'll have a fun little pop lined
recap?
Up. Yeah, recap of everything going on.
A 6-hour recap that makes no sense. If they even attempted that.
I mean, it's no lie that since it's been over a decade since there's even been a main one, but there's been plenty of games in between, that the story is very complicated, and it does seem like the story on the handhelds are probably a little bit more important to the overall plot than the main series ones are.
Well, that's what I mean. Do you think that they're going to...
All in all, I would have to
lean
imagine
in onto that,
if you jump in on 3, which is supposed to be the final one in this Dark Seeker arc, as it's called,
even just
you will be so
confused.
You will be so confused. There's time travel. There's light and dark. There's different realms.
Let's not jump too far down that rabbit hole because we may not talk about anything else. But
it all began.
We can at least say we're both looking forward to that in some way or another. Kingdom Hearts 3. One I'm really looking forward to is Octopath Traveler. Square Enix. It's very reminiscent.
Switch, huh?
What's that?
I was like, oh right, you have a Switch, huh?
Yes.
I was looking forward to that until I saw it was a Switch only thing. I was like,
I'll live. Sucker. No, it's a very kind of retro. Well, not even retro, just reminiscent, kind of nostalgic, but art style similar to like Bravely Default or even the Romancing Saga from like years and years ago. Looks like a fun kind of throwback classic RPG, but it looks like it's a really intriguing, like mature, fun story. And the title is also just kind of wacky, Octopath Traveler.
That's all Square does.
It just rolls off the tongue, right? And that comes out in July. So that one, it's not going to be, not getting all the publicity like a Kingdom Hearts 3 or like a Spider-Man or a Tomb Raider, which both of those I'm also looking forward to.
Both in September.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that'll be interesting. But anyways, that one, it's one of my most excited, one I'm most excited for. So, but yeah, Spider-Man, Tomb Raider, both of those as well. Spider-Man, we'll see. We haven't really seen any real-time gameplay footage.
No, there was.
Has there been? I don't remember.
I think it was last, not TGS, last PlayStation experience.
PSX.
They show a scene, an in-game scene. Granted, it was mostly context sensitive.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I guess it was kind of gameplay, but it seemed to be more like a QuickTime event-y kind of sequence than actual like normal kind of combat or whatever the gameplay is going to be. So yeah, you're right to an extent. But I guess what I'm saying is there hasn't been like a full-on like a 10-minute demo where you're playing through what the nitty-gritty of the game's going to be.
Yeah. Another one, correct me if I was wrong, that got delayed, Days Gone?
Yeah, that is that end of year now? Is it still 2018?
I thought it got delayed into 2019.
I'm not sure. We could check on the dates on that. But yeah, it definitely got delayed again.
That was surprising because Bend has already been working on that for so long
for a couple years.
That for it to get a major delay at this point.
Well, and both at PSX last year and E3 last year, they had pretty big displays of it. So it's like interesting that it keeps getting dragged out. So yeah, I mean, if it makes the product better, I usually am fine with those kind of delays. But at a certain point, it's like, it hopefully isn't problematic. Something like a Duke Nukem 3 or whatever. But yeah, all those. What else? Anything else? There's not too much. Red Dead Redemption 2. Looking forward to that.
I'm trying to think. I actually think the rest of the year is.
I
After
feel
Spider-Man and Tomb Raider, it feels relatively slow.
Yeah, I do feel in a lot of ways 2016, 2017 had a lot of like the kind of culmination of a lot of in the industry, and there, there's slightly cycles as with any industry. And I felt like 2017 especially had a lot, especially with the Switch release and all the Nintendo parties coming out. all that kind of stuff. And 2018, while there's been some good stuff, and there's a few more things on the horizon. I do feel like it's maybe the kind of tail end of that curve until it ramps up again, maybe mid next year or something like that.
Do you think there'll be Death Stranding at E3?
I don't even know. It'll be just like some weird art piece.
15-minute.
It's gonna be interpretive dance trailer or something.
Yes. Oh, you know what I can't wait for?
Uh-huh.
I can't wait for the Ubisoft press conference
reveal
of Just Dance.
Oh yes. Well, they leaked that there's some
2019.
new. But it's not even really a leak. It's like, yeah, of course there's going to be another Assassin's Creed, or there's going to be another...
Beyond Good and Evil 2 should hopefully be there.
That would be cool.
That's also a game I'd be looking forward to.
Yeah, but I don't think that would be anytime this year for sure, even if they had something at E3.
Oh.
Who knows? Well, anyways, so those are a handful of stuff that we're looking forward to. If you guys are looking forward to stuff, let us know. Tell us in the comments and stuff. What games are you guys excited for? But now that we got that out of the way, let's get to the main course.
The main dish.
The main god of course. That is God of War. The new God of War.
What do we call what are they going to call the sequel to this?
Yeah, just God of War. Everything is just God of War.
I mean, they can't, if they call it God of War 2, things will get really confusing really fast.
I think they'll do something where they'll just God of War subtitles. God of War Ragnarok. God of War.
Yeah, that's probably the route they have to go at this point,
whatever.
right? Because this one's technically, 6? 5? 6?
Well, do you count the portables?
I mean, I guess you would have to.
Then it would be 7.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. God of War 7. How come they didn't put a little 7 in the title like Resident Evil did?
That would have been so perfect because the main weapon is an axe. 7 looks like an axe.
There you go. Missed opportunity. All right, I'm going to rewrite all my notes. This game sucks. Well, also, before we begin, of course, there's going to be spoilers. I know it's slightly different with the game when we talk about games, but especially a game like God of War that is so heavily driven by the narrative, we do want to make sure that we point out there are going to be spoilers in the discussion. We're going to be talking about everything, a lot about the story and character stuff. So if you plan on playing the game, we definitely recommend not spoiling yourself, because one of the appeals for me and one of the main attractions was the story, and actually what an amazing job they kind of did of being such a authentic, good story that those revelations and those moments actually hit home and played off well.
I mean, I guess the play off that preamble a little bit to the same effect, also to give a little placement of where I stand on this, was one of the reasons I didn't like God of War before this was mainly because Kratos was a one-note character, just anger. That was his note, no depth. It was just, I'm angry, I'm going to kill everything, right?
Yeah.
What drew me to this was the fact that he was no longer that two-dimensional character, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, you bring up a good point. Before we get straight into let's kind of go a little bit. So my experience with the God of War franchise, I've played all of them and beat all of them. I've even got the platinum trophies on, I think, 1, 2, and 3, maybe even Ascension. But I have not played one of the portable ones. I think Ghost of Sparta or Chain, whatever.
One of the best one.
What's that?
Ghost of Sparta is supposed to be the best.
I don't know if it's that one or the other one I haven't played, but that's the only one I haven't played. I played all the rest of the franchise, and I agree. I think the gameplay, while repetitive for the most part, is the tried and true gameplay. I'm not talking about this one. I'm talking about throughout the previous series. They kept me interested enough, and the world and just like the spectacle of it all kept me going through. But I agree. Not only did I get bored of Kratos, I actively just disliked him by
You're
the
kind
end
of
of it.
rooting against him.
Yeah, I seriously was. It just was just anger for anger's sake, and it was very edgelordy kind of stuff. And in a lot of ways, we'll get into this with the new game, but it was a reminiscent and embodied that persona of the mid 2000s, early 2000s of kind of gamers and just like what games were perceived as back then. A lot in my mind, and then got old pretty quick. I think the first one actually was a really good arc he had an actual arc in that game, but then beyond that, it just kind of became just like pure violence and hatred and anger. not in and of itself being a bad thing, but that because there was nothing more to it than that, it just became old and boring. And like I said, it made me actively dislike Kratos as a character.
Yeah, I mean, I only played 1, I think, halfway through 2, and the first 2 minutes of 3. And I was... Well,
the first 10 minutes of 3 were probably some of the best parts. Again, though, it's just playing on the huge spectacle of it all when you're fighting Poseidon and stuff. Yeah, I can't say there was any depth in terms of like, ooh, some sort of like amazing gameplay revelation or change. It was the same old square, square, triangle, square, square, triangle, square, 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 triangle.
Did you see the little meme online of... this is kind of going into the new God of War with him and his son, and his son's like, "Dad, how did I come? How did I come across, or how was I born?" And Kratos is like, "Do you really want to know?" And he's like, "Tell me everything." And then it's just a bunch of button prompts.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's also really indicative, right? And I think almost every one of the previous ones, there wasn't an ascension. There was a scene, but there was no minigame. There's no sex minigame in this. Like it's evolved a little bit. And,
showing more maturity.
Yeah, then it's like, okay, we're not appealing to the 13-year-old. Not that, there's not some value in appealing to a certain demographic, but they've realized, like, we can't just constantly appeal to this 13-year-old demographic and pretend like we're making anything beyond schlock.
I mean, it kind of comes down to the director, right?
Yeah.
Corey Balrog.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He seems like he's probably matured a bit since back in the day. And before even him, it was David Jaffe's creation. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, you just look at like the minds behind it, and you can see why there was a tonal shift in the end.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's actually kind of interesting a little bit with David Jaffe. The last game he made, that team shooter or whatever, the Drawn to Death or whatever, which didn't do well. And I haven't played it, so I can't say from my own experience, if it was good or bad or anything like that. But I remember reading about it, and from what I understand, it's a very much the same vein as God of War 1 or the early God of War games of just like this crude, like anger and just like, all that kind of mentality. And it feels like you haven't really matured. It's the same mentality that we can expect from a game made in 2005 for people. Oh, video games. Yeah, we're punk rock. And like, but Corey Barlog seems to have taken the other oh, he's matured. He's now a father. You know what I mean? Like, he's like understood that like games, they have to evolve and they have to move beyond that mentality. Otherwise, it's a stagnant art form or it's a stagnant thing and they die out, right? Like it.
And I mean, not to belittle what Corey did with it, but you can see that he was pretty heavily influenced by the other companies that have been kind of paving the way in that same kind of evolution.
Yeah,
right?
and to a certain extent, everyone does that anyway. So, but yeah, and that's a good thing. You should be recognizing and reflecting upon the industry in which you work to a certain extent. In any case, so let's get into it. So I think we both kind of are clear that we both highly enjoyed the game. We wouldn't be doing an episode if it was a game we...
Well, just to mix it up, at some point we'll have to find a game we all hate.
Yeah, but I think we have to find something that we all really hate. It's nothing boring, you know what I mean? But anyway, so yeah, we both enjoyed this a lot. There's just, for me, there is so many moments of just kind of small surprises, nothing like shocking, but just like, oh, that was really cool how they did that. I really appreciate that they did this instead of that, or they did it this way. And just everything about the gameplay was fun. It kept me engaged. That feedback loop kept me constantly wanting to play more. And then undeniably, the game is just presented beautifully. Like it's just such a beautiful game in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, just going right into it, like it's probably one of the best looking games currently on the market. In general, facial animations, the world, just when I booted it up, I saw an older Kratos, right?
Yeah.
A Kratos that had gone away from everything in the first one, and like just the way he looked sold that whole story. Like you didn't need to know what had happened between the end of 3 or whatever and this one, right?
Yeah.
You could just see it in his character.
Yeah.
And that was really, really well designed. Like the changes.
And all the subtle things too. Like, I mean, I guess I wouldn't really even call them subtle. They're kind of blatant. But like, the scar on his stomach and just like the other scars and his wrappings on his arm. all.
I mean, that's how the game basically opens, right?
Yeah,
It opens
exactly.
with him kind of with the wrappings on his
Yeah.
arm, like that old habit of kind of like...
Yeah. And we'll get some more of this when we get into the story, but even how they're presenting it, again, you're storytelling by showing, not telling, right? It's all these small, subtle visual cues that inform you, especially for people who have played it before and know that story, to remind you, like, this is where he's come from, but it's not the same anymore. He's different. And for those who maybe haven't played, there's, I'm sure, undoubtedly a ton of new adopters who just are playing this. It hints at this backstory without having to explain everything to him, and it's way more effective.
Yeah, through his movements and the characters, and I also want to bring up the music.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I never like listened to the God of War soundtrack before this one. I actually went out and I bought this soundtrack.
Oh, really?
I thought Bear McCreary, the guy did, he's the guy that did this. He also does like Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Like I thought, like especially the theme of
Yeah.
this one was just fantastic. It was very
Yeah.
emotional, powerful type stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of carried with it. Like I felt like his history too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, most video game, especially AAA kind of big games like this, have scores now that are on par with any, creative film blockbuster. And this, I think, in a lot of ways, even kind of extends a little bit beyond that, just because game soundtracks have to be so much more dynamic. And there was never a moment where I felt that hand of the director. It always just felt so authentic in the space I was playing and how it blends to each encounter. It just did a really good job, and adapting a lot of just kind of the cultural Norse like tones and influences that, I mean, I don't know really anything about Norse mythology, or culture or history.
I studied the music of
But
Norse mythology.
They did a good job of making it seem like it was real. If it is or isn't, I believed it as like, okay, yeah, I could picture this being, from that time and place, or whatever the fake history place.
So I mean, all of that just in that opening scene. Because,
Yeah.
like I said, I didn't finish 3. I know the story,
Yeah.
but just like the opening with the music and the animations, like a really worn down Kratos and everything. Like I felt I knew everything I needed to know to start this game.
Yeah.
Just in those opening shots.
And also, too, the voice acting. So they got a different voice actor for Kratos this time around. And I remember hearing that. I'm like, oh, that's kind of... Because one of the things I consistently did like from all the previous God of Wars was like, oh, he's a good voice actor. He definitely embodies that just rage and anger. And so I was like, oh, that's kind of curious why they're getting a new voice actor. And I can't say it was the wrong or right decision, but I think I appreciate it. Because, well... If you didn't know it was a new voice actor, if you're not as savvy, you might not even notice. But as someone who did notice the small changes, I also thought it was, important because it's kind of a new beginning, right? And is as much as it's a person behind the voice in the previous games, it is good to know that, like, okay, it's not the same Kratos anymore. And part of that means that we have to change who Kratos is, literally, the voice of Kratos.
Right. I mean, part of it also probably came down to also... the fact that it's become such a trend, especially in these major cinematic things, that, I mean, they're essentially acting on a stage for most of the major plot points, right? Those are fully acted out
the
scenes.
mocap and all that stuff.
So
they're all live captures.
maybe a part of that part played into it.
Yeah, that could be part of it as well.
Like looking for not just an actor that could portray it through their voice, but someone who could also portray it on the mocap stage.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll get into this more when we get into kind of character stuff, but just, again, the way that they did such a good job of being subtle. Kratos doesn't ever say a lot, but everything he says feels super appropriate and just like the perfect thing to say at the time. It's evocative of his emotional state and the relationship with his son, who also, by the way, the voice actor who plays Atreus, I thought was really, really good. I don't know if it's an actual kid or not, but I was first skeptical because...
by the way.
It was played by a kid?
Yeah,
I figured it seemed... way too, again, authentic for it to be an adult kind of mimicking a child. But one thing I was kind of skeptical at first is because in this world of like Norse mythology and gods and just like this ancient idea of what you perceive as mythology, to have Atreus just be like a kid that we would recognize in modern day as like an 11-year-old kid. He doesn't have an accent. He talks with, I mean, he's not using like cool dude kind of lingo, but it's very, representative of our current discussion.
Singing Justin Bieber.
Yeah,
down the
exactly.
street.
Like, I thought at first for a while, like, oh, is that going to make sense in this world? And it does. I think it totally does. I think they got, for the most part, all the characters kind of adopt a more modernized, conversational tone, but without abandoning this epic kind of, mythology scale of what they're talking about. So
yeah, so I mean, just those opening moments were all really good.
Yeah.
And then I guess going further into it is the graphics of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So this one went a little hub and spoke with this design, right? So the hub being the Lake of Nine, the home area, and a couple other places, right?
Yeah.
And then the spoke being all the story related elements. But just the Lake of Nine itself, it just bled Norse to me. Yeah. Like when I got out there in my little canoe simulator and I'm just canoeing everywhere in this lake, you got Jormungandr just chilling up there and all that stuff. And the statues,
there's fjords all around.
Fjords everywhere. Gold just floating in water apparently.
It's just like Norway.
Also, just like the structures, like the statues of like Thor and stuff, like all broken down. Like it really, they did a good job of making it feel different from the Greece of the original series and making me feel like it was like Nordic, like. Oh yeah, for sure. And just the way they infused like small things like the runes everywhere you went, and just kind of the symbolic representations of those things. On small things too, just like the menu, but especially the map. Like, I think it's real easy to overthink a map in modern gaming or make it too detailed, which in general I actually like. I love maps just in general, but games that really draws me to the world, I really like the map in this, where it's not so detailed that it shows every single little path, but it's representational to an accurate enough level, but also infuses that sense of the Norse mythology. Yeah. Just there's all the runes everywhere and the kind of symbols I really enjoyed that aspect of it too. Also, you go to a couple of different realms. If anybody that's watched the Marvel movies knows about Thor and its realms, I felt each realm felt very different from it. Yeah, the other one, and like Helheim, it had a really cool vibe to it. Alfheim, Muspelheim. And that's what I mean too when I was saying how there was often times where I was consistently surprised. The first time you go to another realm, I was like, what the heck? Where there's a whole other like realm you go to, and then that there's even more of them. Just that transition, the transition. I remember because you go into that room, right, and it's all the graphics, the room's spinning. Yeah. You see Yggdrasil kind of wrapping around you to transport you. You got because it's Alfheim is the first place you go to, right? Yeah. You see it has a more woodish vibe to it, which is different than the Lake of Nine. So you see like all these vines and giant flowers and such, and I remember that being one of my favorite moments in the game when I was playing. Yeah, and even like when you first walk into Alfheim and you kind of see this conflict between the Light Elves and Dark Elves playing out around you, and you're just kind of walking through this world, and as a player, obviously it's like already pretty like breathtaking, like, oh, what's going on? I was not expecting this. And as this is happening, all these conflicts that play into the story and the gameplay all kind of infuse really well. I think you mentioned a lot of the statue stuff. All that stuff's really great, and I think just the character design is really, really good of the actual like protagonists and antagonists and stuff. A lot of the side characters, Mimir is brilliant. I thought it was just he's like the idea of just a head being a character who's like your companion. I thought it was so great. And like the Dwarven brothers and stuff, all that was great. The one criticism I would have maybe for it is I did think that a lot of the enemies were kind of bland. Some of them were interesting. And there was a more limited design. So the Draugrs, they all looked alike, overall, and they were mostly what you fought. Yeah. Then there were travelers, there were elves, and I mean, there was, in terms of the gameplay aspect of the enemies, I felt there was a pretty good variety, but in terms of the visual variety and just the way they're designed, No, I agree with you. Yeah. It's actually a problem I have with a lot of games, and it's way more obvious in even bigger games, right? Like, you go out into, like, an open world game, like, for sure. As much as I love Witcher 3, you run into that same problem, right? It's just like, I'm fighting another variation of a troll, but it looks really just the same as everything.
Put a different color palette on them or something like that, and
which is understandable why they have to. But yeah, I see what you're saying, and I kind of agree.
Again, it's a pretty minor criticism, especially because I think for the most part, in terms of what's important with enemies, is the gameplay variety. I think that's still solid, but yeah, just in terms of like. Especially after, because it's a pretty long game, especially after how many hours you've been playing it and you're on your whatever X number of encountered, and it's like, oh, another group of draugrs. It's just, it feels a little tiny bit like, okay, I've seen this and done this before.
Right.
Kind of.
No, also going back to your note about the character designs and how they just all felt, I agree, and kind of going a little off topic here, it's something that I brought up when Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice came out. And this came out, is I really like how dirty it kind of is. Because I feel like the public perception of Norse mythology right now is very clearly that Marvel.
Well, that's what I mean.
Which is a very pretty boy, Thor, and all that stuff. I like that these two things, Norse mythology based, like they're darker, they're grittier, not like just like edgelord type stuff, but it's just like, you know, things don't have to be pretty boy. They can be just like...
Yeah, it's more
tribalistic, I guess.
More tribalistic, more lived in. It imbues a stronger sense of just like history to a lot of it. If it's not quite as shiny, if that makes sense, and not quite as that same veneer. One thing I did like, well, we'll get into some more of the story, but kind of goes towards the presentation, is that as much as there is that kind of grittiness, I can't overstate how much I appreciate that it wasn't just full of hatred and anger and violence in this world. That there was beauty to be found, that there was interactions and communication and relationships and like compassion, and all those things were there in this game. And I think that's, if I had to like just on a holistic level say why I stopped liking the previous God of War games, is because they stopped liking that. Like, ultimately, it was just Kratos, no rhyme, reason, or whatever, just destroy everything. And that is just...
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but, I mean, this is also just aided by the fact that this one, you have a son that follows you everywhere.
Totally.
But there's also just a lot more characters that you're frequently in contact with in this one, like the Witch of the Woods.
It feels more a live world.
Mimir,
like,
right? Yeah. And I feel like that's, like you said, probably something that was lacking in the other ones, because then, if you're just Kratos running around everywhere angry with nobody to play off of, then it's a one-note story.
Yeah, so that all aided that kind of sense of a living world.
The story, so...
Well, like
I love the story.
Yeah, like, so going into the part of the lived world, or the lived world that I was talking about, and what I was saying in terms of it just being a more dynamic interaction that the player has instead of just destruction, and that is at the heart of what the story is about, right? And I think that's another reason why I was surprised kind of throughout. But even in that way, it was never so like expected. There was still an ambiguity. There was still a little bit twists and turns. And as much as a story is a simple story, it's really simple. They got to get our mom's ashes to the top of this mountain. How many ways and interactions and scenarios that plays out through, like, it's just kept me constantly interested in the story. But also the heart of it all is just the relationship between Kratos and Atreus.
Yeah, like, previously it was all about revenge, right?
Yeah.
This one, like you said, very simple story. It's motivated by a mother's last wishes, right? Which, once we get to the ending of it, we realize there was more to that wish, right? But for the entirety of the game, you're sitting there, you're like, we're just trying to get this person's ashes to the highest peak of all the realms or whatever, and all this crap keeps happening around us.
Yeah.
We just want to do this thing.
And there's like all this like kind of drama of all the gods, and you're just like, I don't want to be involved. I just let us do this thing.
Which I thought the new actor for Kratos did a good job of portraying, right? He's like, been there, done that. Yeah. Trust me, kid, you don't want to be a part of this. Let's just stay focused.
Can everyone just leave us alone? Like, even like the allies at first, and even, throughout most of it, Kratos is very reticent to kind of have anything to do with them. It's like, I'm not touching that. Oh, okay, fine. If it'll help us, do we need to open this door?
Is it a literal wall in my path?
Yes.
Then I'll go through it. But anything other than that, I don't want to get sidetracked.
Yeah, and but also, and so you have that kind of mindset, and then you have Atreus, who is the exact opposite, if not the exact opposite in the foil, off of that, where he's just so enthralled by everything he encounters, and he's just so passionate and excited to interact with new people, and he thinks, and I think on even on a maybe a deeper level, I think it's a cool kind of metaphor to an extent of the games industry as a whole, right? You have the previous, like, if not previous generations, then the kind of old mentality of just like, games are just like straightforward, like Kratos is like, I gotta go do my thing. And then you have slightly more modern gaming where it's a little bit more open world and more about players' decisions and how they're going to interact with this immersive environment. And that's Atreus, where Atreus is kind of, no, we want to do all these things. And Kratos is like, no, we're doing this one thing. And how that kind of blends into ultimately something that's better than either one, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have much to go off on that one.
Oh, okay,
I disagree with you.
You disagree?
No, I just agree with you.
Yeah, it was just a thought I had. I don't know
it's
how
like
much that's intended.
Also,
but...
just like the little notes, like when you first start doing side quests, and Kratos is like, boy, stay focused.
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
that's what he's like, no, we're doing this. And Atreus is like, come on.
They kind of play it off, too, right? Because after a while, you start doing more of those side quests, and Kratos is just like, it's for resources.
Well, and another thing, too, I was actually surprised at how funny I found it. And not funny in the traditional, in the common way games can be funny, where it's just like jokes or whatever. It's funny for character-based comedy. Like, it's only funny because it's Kratos saying this, or it's Atreus saying this. There are so many tiny little moments where just like, Atreus, he has like some comment, and Kratos just completely straight playing it just because that's who his character is, having some dismissive line or whatever, and it just being just really funny. Or sometimes the opposite, where Kratos would be doing something or have some comment about the impact or importance of a certain thing, and Atreus being just like a kid, not understanding the full implications of what Kratos is saying. So his comment being just like completely genuine, but also just really funny at the same time. So they did a really good job with the writing in terms of those aspects, I thought.
Yeah. So, I mean, most of the game in the canoe simulator 2018 is you rowing in a canoe, talking to your son.
Most of the game.
Most of the game is a canoe simulator. Especially with how many times I had to backtrack to places in the Realm of 9 as I unlocked new abilities and stuff. It was a canoe simulator.
Well, I suppose that's true. I mean, there was a lot of canoeing. You do unlock fast travel later on. That was another criticism I have, is that it was kind of clunky fast travel system. But all the canoe parts were, thankfully, I felt entertaining.
Yeah, they do that thing now, right? Where they this every time, as soon as the game recognizes, they've been in here for 10 seconds without stopping, so they're going somewhere.
Yeah.
Therefore, activate this scene, right? And so you'd have a good heart-to-heart or something or maybe Kratos would regale Atreus with a horrible story from Greece times or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was good. And then, like you brought up earlier, Mimir, the talking head, he gets added into it. And then once he's part of it, he gives a lot of backstory to that universe, that world. And that was all really good. And that brings me to a note that one thing I will credit even to the old God of War and to this God of War is how they portray these like beliefs, right? These religions, if you will. I don't know what you want to call them. But, this... Once again, going back to the Marvel thing, there's the Disney version of this stuff, like Hercules and things like that. And then there's this like grittier version. Now, I mean, reading into this stuff, the real version's laying somewhere in between, really. They're not this bad. But like, I love the fact that like the kind of concept of the God of War games is just like how Kratos feels about gods, right? In general, he's like, gods don't care about people.
Yeah.
That's why they're gods, right? They have this attitude. And so there's this real negative attitude that Kratos has, and it's actually self-loathing, him being a god himself.
Yeah.
All that stuff. It's just really good, like one of the things they just kept hammering on was just how terrible Thor is, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that too, because Thor and Odin too, both of them, they constantly are referencing them, and there's these imposing figures, these figures that just leave a path of destruction wherever they go.
Mm-hmm.
But you never see them throughout the game, and that's something I don't know how you felt about that. I appreciate it in one sense because the story wasn't about them. So I'm glad they didn't force this thing like, oh, you have to go fight Odin now, because it wasn't about that. So I'm glad they didn't force that. But at a certain level, they're building up this so much that you're like, oh, I can't wait to fight Odin, and then you never do. Not in this game.
I mean, I agree with you, and I think it was for the best, right?
Yeah.
I feel like, so Baldur is, I mean, spoiler alert, Baldur is the main villain of this game, right?
He's antagonist, if not villain antagonist.
He's in your way. And they do a good job when you fight him, where you feel like freaking basically Superman fighting each other, right?
Yeah. You feel like God. It's just like...
But, no, with as much as they talked about Thor, you're like, especially since his two sons are in the game, too. Little known fact, I don't know if you knew this, they were both voiced by Troy Baker and Nolan North.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's pretty funny. I knew Troy Baker was voice on him, I didn't know Nolan North did until I watched the credits. But I didn't realize it was the two brothers. That's pretty funny. Uncharted reference.
And a lot of other things. They have a new YouTube channel.
Oh, do
together,
they?
Where they play retro games, and then they.
Oh, that's kind of a cool idea. I just meant specifically.
Anyways, getting a little off topic. But yeah, you never get to Thor, and you're expecting him because it's like Thor does this, Thor did this, Thor did this, right? But I think it was absolutely imperative that they didn't go that grand, right? I love that Baldur is the only one really in your way, because it allows Atreus and Kratos to have that grounded story. I feel like even if Thor was thrown in with as grand a character as he is and everything, it would then have leaned the story more towards what it was versus what it was becoming, right?
It would become, you're right, it would become more of, look at all these evil gods or the pantheon of Norse gods that we now have to go kill. And that's not what this was about. And that's what I was talking about earlier, where it's not just about destruction. You have Baldur, who he's a conflicted villain, like by the end you understand, like it's not just like we got to kill him to kill him, but beyond him there's other like you run into, well, obviously like Freya and the Jormungand or whatever the Midgard serpent is. Like you're not attacking the Midgard serpent, he's an ally, you know what I mean? Like but in a previous version of this game, or a game of made 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there would be some crazy epic battle where you're fighting Jormungandr, where you're skating along his scales, you're going inside him, you're tearing him apart from the inside, like, right? But it's not that. And so those moments, I love those moments. Or even Mimir, like, you are an ally. He's not a god, but, like, he's an active participant in your story, and it's not so solo.
Also, one thing I really loved about Mimir's character in particular was I was so certain at some point he would flip, right?
Yeah.
I was so certain at some point something negative would happen with his character, and I was so appreciative of the story when nothing did.
Yeah.
It's just like, he's just a straightforward guy,
god guy,
that was
smartest man in the realm, or whatever it is.
Like, I appreciate that there were, same thing with the dwarves, right?
And I was expecting it with the dwarves,
especially after that whole arrow scene.
Exactly,
with Freya,
because Sindri gives you those arrows, and then
that was just because they were made of Odin.
Yeah, and so I was like, "Oh wait, is Sindri bad?" But then it never happened. It's just because of the circumstances.
I like that they never tried to pull the carpet out from underneath.
Yeah,
me, right. It was like, I'm so expecting of those things now when I play through stories and games and everything.
Exactly. I think,
and even the same thing with Last of Us, which clearly had a major impact on what this game became. Right. Yeah. Like, that game pulls the carpet out from underneath you frequently, right? Not in a negative light, but just like, it's something that even games like this, they just do it to keep you so enthralled, but this game managed to do it without ever having to fall back on that stuff.
Well, it's refreshing in a way where you're not having to constantly second guess things, or you're not trying to find, well, to a certain extent you are, because you're, in some ways, you're of Kratos' mindset, and you're like, I'm just waiting for someone to betray me. I'm just waiting. Give me a reason to distrust you. And when that never really happens, it's refreshing. And you understand and appreciate the kind of innocence from Atreus. And that it being an important part of you. That not everything is, you just got to kill it. Like, there's value in discussing and talking and going towards his powers and like his skills, Atreus's, that he could read other languages and he could communicate with other people. Like that's such a it's a cool ability, but it speaks so much to what the theme of this game is getting towards. He is a modern god, Atreus, and that doesn't mean that he just goes around killing things.
Except when he finds out he is a god and he gets a freaking attitude.
So I did have a couple small criticisms with the story, and those were the beats that I felt. So as I was playing through them, I didn't mind them because at the time they came across as so forced that I was expecting some sort of explanation, like he was under some sort of influence or spell, especially when you go to Helheim and you see like the shadow versions of themselves, and he's like, what? I said that? I don't remember saying that. I was expecting them to explain that away, but they never did. So to me, a lot of those beats came across as like, I don't know, those character 180s were a little disingenuous. Like they were forced.
Well, I mean, just the moment when he found out he was a god, right?
Yeah.
He almost immediately gains an attitude.
Yeah.
And I instinctively eye rolled, right?
Yes,
I was
exactly.
just like, oh god,
well,
I gotta go through this arc now.
At first, he doesn't. The very first time he finds out he's God, that's one of those moments that are so just endearing and kind of comical because Kratos tells him, "You're a god," and he's like, "I am." Can I turn into an animal or something? And it's just like such a
he's like
perfect. He's like, I don't
know.
It's like such a perfect moment because it totally captures what it's like for a father and a child relationship, but also all of this baggage Kratos has with being a god and everything that's built up to this moment where like he's refused to say anything, and finally it's this moment of Kratos just like, this could break the relationship. I might lose my son at this moment, and he could hate me, or you're a god, and he's expecting this big thing, and all I whoa, that's kind of cool. Can I turn into an animal? Like that's what I mean. It's such a brilliant moment. And so that moment I liked, but then as it plays off down the line, you're right. Those other moments where Atreus all of a sudden just like gets a big head out of nowhere, those came across as false. He starts
yelling at Sindri and everything.
Yeah, like that came across as false to me.
The moment so the big scene was right before you go back to Helheim where he screws with you and Baldur in the fight. I was like, I'm going to kill you, kid. I am going to be the one to kill you now.
And then when you go back to Helheim, it's just like, again, it's like a switch has been turned off and he's back to normal Atreus. It's like, so that's why I was like, there must have been something influencing him. But when you find out there never was, or at least it never says there anything was, those was like, wait a second. Those felt forced to me. And it came across as like, well, you just needed these to play off for the sake of it.
Right. Another forced thing, only because I didn't really, maybe it's best because I didn't understand it fully what they were going for, was his sickness that was caused by the fact that he didn't realize he was a god. Vague. Like, I'm not 100% sure why that would, like, it's never explained to me why that would lead to him being sick.
Yeah, I agree with you. It didn't bother me too much, but I do agree it wasn't so specific. It was just more like a mental, his body knew what he was, but his mind didn't. So it was just like a conflict of these things.
But I mean, they gave him sick to the point of almost dying.
Yeah, like, I don't know. And then exactly, you need to go find the light of the heart of the guardian in Helheim to cure him. It's like, what do you mean? Like, what is this a common sickness where gods don't know they're gods? Like that, what this cures? So yeah, no, I agree. That was, again, I felt those parts a little forced because it seemed to inform like the gameplay more than the other way around, which for the most part I really appreciate. The story and the characters driving this informed what kind of gameplay you were doing, and it felt natural. But in those moments, it was like, oh, we need to have this little thing where he goes on some crazy adventure, or he goes and gets his blades or whatever. We just need that to happen. So yeah, Atreus gets sick or whatever.
Okay, so what did you think of this? Okay, so the ending aside, do you think Kratos was afraid of his son killing him?
The what ending? Like the very end?
The first ending. That aside, do you think Kratos had a fear of Atreus ever killing him? Because
ever killing him, yes.
Because that's just a common thing for Greek gods to do.
Well, and that's what the whole
patricide is all what Greeks are about.
Yes, they're all killing him.
But two, it's the whole Zeus thing in Helheim.
Yeah.
And is just like that broke him down, like Kratos down so much. He was so afraid Atreus had saw that, oh, I had killed my father
Oh.
or whatever, something like that. Like,
That's a good point. I didn't think about it in that regard, but it is a good point. Like, I was more afraid that. I mean, I guess in an indirect way, yes. To me, Kratos was afraid that Atreus would become himself,
right.
which I guess part of that is killing his father. But I didn't really recognize that aspect of it. He was just more afraid of Atreus becoming what he considers a monster himself, a bad person, right?
Mhm.
And that's what his bigger fear was, I think.
And then it's revealed in the first ending that it's foretold that he will be there. At least it doesn't show him killing Kratos, but it kind
it's a
of
very vague,
because the picture shows like he's absorbing Kratos' essence or whatever.
Yeah, and so that's why. Well, obviously, they're planning on making more, and there's implications for a lot more to do with the story. And again, I think why it's smart they didn't leave Odin, or they left Odin and Thor out, because obviously we broaden it up and make it bigger in the next couple games. But I hope that this series is going to be about breaking those cycles and those chains, right? So whether it's foretold or not, or that it doesn't have to be that way, that he could be his own person. I think it's really important too that like Atreus was supposed to be Loki, and so you could say that he is Loki, yeah, but he's not Loki, he's Atreus. So I think that's an important distinction. I think that's kind of clever of them to do. Like, so all of our conceptions of what Loki is. That was like, because like the whole time, also the whole game, I was like, okay, they're mentioning Thor and Odin. Everyone knows them. Everyone knows Freya, and like but wait, where's Loki? Everyone knows who Loki is, but they're not even going to bring up Loki. So I was thinking that the whole time. I was expecting, like we were talking about a twist. Oh, Mimir is Loki. He's the trickster. Someone like. So when that was revealed, and it makes a lot of sense because Loki is a giant and a god, and that's what Atreus is.
Well, I mean, this still falls within him playing the Loki part, right? Because at the end, they bring on that winter, which is the foretelling of Ragnarok, right? So obviously moving forward, and this is all through Kratos and Loki's Atreus' doing, right? They're bringing on Ragnarok essentially.
Yeah. But my point being that is I hope and I think that a lot of what they're getting at and what this game's going to be about is breaking that destruction of violence. That it doesn't have to be that way, despite what the cycle of history, or and even Kratos saying that I have to end the cycle. We can't just have constantly killing our progenitors. So I'm excited for the next several games. If not for that, or for other reasons than that specifically.
All right, so we've talked a lot about Kratos and Atreus and stuff, but the other dynamic, Baldur and Freya, we haven't really touched on them at all.
Yeah, and I think they're the foil to Kratos and Atreus, right? I think they start from similar positions, and that's all reminiscent of the previous God of War games. They start from a lot of what could become a broken relationship and mistakes being made in the relationship. And we see how Kratos and Atreus are able to forge ahead and build a stronger relationship by recognizing each other, who they are and what their mistakes were and what they can be. And Freya and Baldur not being able to do that, and that just being a corrupt, negative relationship. So I don't know. I agree. I think it's a really important distinction, though, and comparison to make between those two.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see where they go with Freya and the sequels, since she's sworn revenge against you and everything like that.
And it's kind of interesting because then right after that, Mimir's like, she'll come around. It's like, it'll be all right. Is she gonna come?
I don't want her as an enemy. I liked her.
Yeah,
that was another thing, right? Is they do a good job. I actually felt her love for her son, right?
No, it's completely understandable too, because Kratos, I don't know if he says in so many words, but he's like, yeah, I'd do the same thing. If your life was threatened, I'm of course going to try to like kill whoever's doing it. So I totally get where she's coming from, and I understand that. But at the same time, like, that doesn't justify him killing her. I couldn't let that happen. We had to end that. So
I was kind of, during that final fight where she's interfering, at first I wasn't even attacking.
I know.
I was like, I don't want
to.
Right? I was like okay, I side with you, Freya. I will back off if you could get this under control.
Especially that moment where like it's pretty much the end of the fight, and it's become kind of the quick timey parts, but where you basically have the chance to just pummel Baldur. And I'm like, I'm not going to. I don't want to. And I was just sitting there. I'm like, all right, I'll punch him once. No, and I sit there, and literally, I sat there long enough that the game just like cued the next thing. I imagine it's just a timed sequence, but
No fail state.
yeah, exactly. But it was still just like, no, I don't want to. Like, I get it. I don't want to kill him, and that's also why I definitely appreciate Atreus. Like, no, Dad, it's done. You don't need to like. There's no point in killing him. He's beaten. In the end, you do. I have mixed feelings about Kratos killing him in the end.
I mean, it's just like one of those things where Baldur refused to stop.
Yeah.
Right? Even his masochism, it was pretty funny after. So I did a little research afterwards, and that I'm not sure where the mistletoe came from in the game.
It's just Sindri has, here's some mistletoe arrows. They're kind of from nowhere. It's kind of weird.
But so that is the actual lore, right?
Oh,
It's the
they're
fact
wheat
that when Baldur was born, Freya made everything in the world promise not to hurt him, right? And that was the source of his invulnerability, except Mistletoe never agreed, or she never bothered to ask, is so unassuming, right? But Loki found out about that, and then he ends up using that to kill Baldur, which starts Ragnarok, so on and so forth. So I thought it was interesting. I was just like, where the hell did that mistletoe
it's kind
come
of a
from?
weird thing, and they never really explain it.
But beyond that, it's just like, Baldur, as soon as he was able to feel, he just turned super mad. He's like, cut me! I feel so good, right? Cut me more!
And then, when you get the axe, and it's like all the scenes.
He's just like, yes! It's like, put it away, Baldur. Put it away. And then, it was just, he wasn't going to quit, right? He was still so unforgiving of her.
Well, I mean, that, and again, it's the foil to Kratos and Atreus. It's what happens when, if Kratos continued on the path that he was, as the role he was playing in the beginning of the game as that type of father, that's what Atreus would become Baldur.
You know, you may call me a nerd for bringing it back to this, but it's actually almost exactly the same thing.
Don't you say it.
Exact same thing as Man of Steel, right?
You son of a... I knew it.
It's the exact same thing, right? It's where Superman knew Zod would not stop.
Yeah.
And they were equals. The same thing with Kratos and Baldur, right? They were essentially equals. And it was one of those things where Baldur would not stop. It would just be forever a pain in Kratos' side, having to protect Freya and such. Yeah. Or Freya would just die, which he didn't want, and things like that. Very similar to Man of Steel.
Very similar. No, I mean, I like it because if nothing else, it is a little bit more nebulous and ambiguous in terms of the gray. Like, it's not pure black and white, whereas the previous God of War, it was just pure destruction. There's no point in it at all. And this one, it's a much more nuanced, like, okay, we're not saying this was the right thing to do, but it was better than the alternatives, right? And that's a much more subtle, interesting idea than kill everything, right? But yeah, so the most part though, the story and character stuff was all amazing.
Do you think you're gonna, in the sequel, return to Alfheim? Because remember, they mentioned that you may have made the wrong choice.
Yeah, that was also a subtle thing that I was like, they never really went back to it. Also, I gotta believe that because you go to the 6 of the 9 realms, you don't go to Asgard, Vanaheim, which is where the 2 god races are from, and then the last realm, which they never really talk about or explain in any way, is like Svartalfheim or something like that. And I don't know what that realm is or anything like that. So in any case, like, there's so much, I could already see the potential of like, okay, we're going to go to Asgard in one of the new games, right? I feel like that's a given.
Also, while we're talking about Alfheim, I do want to point out that was probably my favorite scene in the game. Was when you were trying to get to the crystal in Alfheim, and all those dark elves and you're just like plowing through them, because that was probably one of the very few times in the game, other than your fight with Baldur, where I was just like, I felt like Kratos, the God of War, right? I was just like, you're literally just charging through these people.
No, it was a really fun set piece where you're just like pummeling, destroying all these armies, and then it was a really cool moment too when you walk into the light and you're going towards Faye. And you come back and just Atreus sitting on this mountain of dead elves.
He's like, you were gone for so long. You're just like,
you made me kill all these people, and like how like destructive that was.
Left
on it.
Me, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that was a good story beat too. He was like, you left me.
Oh yeah, that's what it was. And Kratos just kind of being so afraid of the monster he is and becoming too indulgent. And after all he's done to try to protect him, these brief moment, and he's just completely left his son vulnerable, and how much damage is done to him. Yeah, there are a lot. Those were the best parts of the game. Those moments, those types of moments throughout, were really great. Well, yeah. Do you have anything else to say, story character wise? I think we kind of nailed everything I want to talk about.
There's the one, probably the best story beat for Kratos in the game, which we haven't touched on at all.
What's that?
Major spoiler alert. Is when he goes to fetch the Blades of Chaos.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, that whole sequence when Atreus is sick, he gets the blades and goes to Helheim.
But it is... Yeah. That made my hair stand up, right?
Yeah, it was the first specific reference to anything that's come before. When you see Athena in the boat and she doesn't say anything.
And then it's just like, you know Kratos' hesitance to do this, and they really draw it out, right?
Yeah.
They're like, he gets in the boat all quiet, and... You're also it goes well because there's a thunderstorm going on in the background, which I'm not sure exactly. I thought that had to do with Thor.
Well, later on it implies that Atreus's emotional state has to do with, right? Because when Atreus gets really angry and like the thunder comes down a little bit later on.
Right.
So I'm curious now if that's supposed to be partially because of him, or is it just a mood and it doesn't really have any relations to anything?
I don't know. I thought it was because then isn't somebody blows the horn like right after or right before or something?
Oh, do they?
Yeah, they blow the Jormungandr horn.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah. So you have like a lot going on, right? Because I heard the horn blow and I was like, I want to know who blew it.
Yeah.
I want to know what's going on over there. But the game obviously is like, nope, you're going this way, right?
Yeah,
and you're going down, like you're going down the river very slowly. It's doing a good rotational camera deal, and then you see Athena show up, which was a major character in the previous series, and then it's just like his attachment to Athena, and he's like, I'm not your tool anymore, right? When he goes and actually gets the blades, and he sees Athena at the door, and she reminds him, you will always be this person. And he's like, right, but I'm not your person anymore. Like that whole thing was just ridiculously powerful.
That when I remember playing through that really kind of gave me, like you said, gave me chills, and just like, oh man, this is. And it's funny too because I don't know if I ever really felt that way playing through any of the other God of Wars, but just the not like touching on those memories and stuff. And I think even playing upon that, they know people's perceptions of those games. And any time where it's like you're reminded of what Kratos used to be and what, as a player, you used to do, where you were just wanton destruction, and to remind the player and Kratos at the same time of like, we remember what you did. You can't pretend that didn't happen. We know what you did. Yeah. And as a player, to like, have I grown beyond that? Am I still just this, mindless person who loves to mash buttons and see blood on screen, or am I beyond that now? Have I grown into appreciate something more than what it was and what it could be? So,
also I really liked Tyr's room.
Oh, that whole
how he awesome. Had references to literally every, or not literally.
A lot of them. Egyptian,
he had
Greece.
He had a lot of different religions all mashed up there, hinting at you can go anywhere now in this universe. These gods are all very wary of one another.
Yeah, so they left it open for sure for the potential of not just Norse stuff in the future. I imagine that will still be a focus, but who knows? They might kind of go.
Yeah, so I thought that was pretty areas.
Cool. Well, like we said, if you were hesitant about spoilers, too late now. We just pretty much ruined everything for you.
All in all, it's just, I love the fact that they kept it so small, though. The father-son story, right? Don't follow the sins of the past. Things like that. Like, it was really good.
Yeah. They kept the story simple. I wouldn't say purely small, but small compared to what it could have been. But I think while still having a lot of those set piece spectacle moments, and this kind of goes into the gameplay, but they didn't necessarily skimp on it. They still had those plenty jaw dropping moments, even if you weren't necessarily fighting Thor or anything like that. When you first see Jormungandr, or when you're fighting the dragon for the first time, or when you're fighting Baldur when you try to go to the Jotunheim. And there's just that crazy air sequence when you're fighting on that air beast or whatever it is. All of those things were a lot of just as spectacular as previous games. But it doesn't need to have to do with this is the fate of the world we're dealing with. Yeah. No, it's just about, stop trying to block us. We're just trying to do something. Yeah. But yeah, so the spectacle moments were great. I mean, I think it's undoubtedly those, especially this generation of games, they know how to do those moments really well. Part of that too is, I think, the change in perspective from the previous God of War, where you're, far back camera and it felt more like an arena. Now the camera's way more up close. It felt much more intimate, and it felt much more, intentional for everything you were doing. And it definitely helped those moments too. So when you're doing those big, crazy, epic moments, you're right there with Kratos in this crazy maelstrom of whatever's going on.
Right. So there was a huge shift in the gameplay between this and the previous ones, right? The previous ones were a straightforward action, right?
Yeah.
It was very much a Devil May Cry or any, like that.
Yeah, for sure.
This one is very... I know for a fact that the Corey didn't like it being referenced like this, but like a Dark Souls, Bloodborne type game.
Yeah, I would say closer to Bloodborne, because I did feel it was a little faster than a Dark Souls, but and I understand why maybe he'd be hesitant to those descriptions. I think it's just because it's more like it was such a change that people are naturally going to do it. I found it similar to Batman in the Arkham games, not because of the combat style per se, but because of the perspective, and again, going to the size of Kratos on the screen. It reminded me how much like Batman. He's such a dominant presence on your screen just as a player that it's really hard not to just feel like embodying him as he's doing all these things.
So this game, the previous games were very much a button masher, right? You can get through them just mashing attack, right? This one kind of does away with that through multiple means, right? One, the combat is just refined to a degree to where you don't have a catch-all attack anymore. Like in the previous ones, you would just spin the blades of chaos around you in a circle the whole time, and you'd be okay. You'd be hunky-dory. Yeah. The other part is the enemy AIs and how they design them. They're a lot tougher in this game. The difficulty has been ramped up, even on normal mode.
The variety of things you can do, too, makes it so you kind of have to be aware of all of your abilities.
The RPG elements.
Well, what difficulty did you play through?
I played through it on hard, not God of War, because I heard that mode's kind of BS.
I also played through it on hard mode, and I was really happy with that difficulty, I felt. Yeah. It was a perfect balance, I thought.
I love the combat, don't get me wrong. However, it falls into a term that you're probably very accustomed to, the ludonarrative dissonance, right? Is the fact that I am Kratos, the God of War. I am a Superman. And yet, oddly enough, the hardest parts of the game and the parts where you're most likely to die are on the very scrub enemies, right? Yeah,
well, when there's a lot of enemies in an arena are usually the harder spots. Some of the bosses were actually easier because it's so much easier to focus on one. Yeah. In a lot of ways, it was really cool because it felt like a duel, right? Like it was just you and you, and you just who's the best at their abilities, and am I the best at knowing what abilities to use?
Which is what the Valkyries are, right?
Yeah, the Valkyries are great. I've only actually fought one Valkyrie so far. There's a lot of end game content I still need to do, but Valkyrie fight was awesome. Even though I failed a lot on it, I never felt frustrated. I felt like, I know what I'm doing. I know what I did wrong there. I know what I did wrong there, right?
I had one Valkyrie that I was fighting. It was like 11 at night. And this ended up going until like 1. Where I just kept dying on the last little bar of health, right? I would get her, then I would go into attack dog mode, right?
Yeah,
I'd be
like, I just gotta get her done.
Almost there.
But that,
and
they
I
punish
just
you,
kept dying, and I kept dying. I did it for 2 hours, and I was just like, screw it. I'm putting it down. I'm going to bed. Screw this game.
Because you get so close, and they know. They're like, that. Don't do it. Don't
but you know what you're doing wrong, right?
Exactly.
I came back the next day, beat the first time.
You're getting greedy. Yeah. No, I so in a lot, but again, those dual aspects definitely felt more Dark Soulsian. Because it's just like the one-on-one and knowing your abilities, and you're being more deliberate in whatever ability you choose to do. And those huge arenas, not huge, but bigger arenas with more guys, especially guys with like projectiles as their melee guys. Those were the ones I found the most frustrating. And part of it was because it felt like a lot of times. I wouldn't say that you had no options, but it just felt like there was very little I could have, like you kind of had to, there was a lot of luck that was involved. That maybe luck's not the right word, but like there were parts where like there was nothing I could have done.
Mm-hmm.
I just got ganked there, and I really didn't have any options. And I think as I also like the comment a lot, but one of the criticisms I do have is that those moments, I think those moments are exacerbated though, is because sometimes I'm almost like paralyzed with too many options.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I agree.
There's so many things you could do at any one time. You're like, what's the best thing to do here? And then you're like going through, I could use my axe, I could throw my axe, I could use Atreus, I could use my fist, I could use my blades, I could use my runic attack, my second runic attack, I could go into rage mode. Like, and each one of those things has branching abilities after you do, so you're constantly just like, and so you inevitably fall to some of your tried and true, but you can't rely on those all the time. So you have to mix it up, but it's hard to keep all of that in your mind.
So I'll be interested to know how you built your Kratos, because it really comes down to how you built, right? So one valid build would, so you have what, attack, defense, cooldown, runic, a couple luck, stuff like that, right? So I built attack and defense mainly. I got this amulet really early on that increased my parry window. And then after that, so killing all the enemies in the game, basically, and doing all the side content awards you way more than enough. It's probably broken how much more than enough it gives you experience to put in and max out your tree. I maxed out my tree on like everything really quick.
I did pretty.
And so I had all that
early.
stuff. So, and then I got runes.
Runic? Or what?
No, like the elements you put on the weapons.
Enchantments?
Yes. I put those. I got a lot of those that had like rage mode, where rage rage mode, but
bonuses to rage,
or not bonuses to your rage, like your Spartan rage, but bonuses like where you'll just double your damage.
You get little
like that.
Bursts of a perk. Or
yeah,
something.
So I had a lot of those, and I even had it to where it would pop on parries, successful parries. So I turned myself into just like this freaking destructive cannon, master. Where it's just like I have an open, a wider open area to parry, and then that would then increase my damage afterwards and stuff like that. So I was doing so much ridiculous damage because I built attack and defense.
Yeah.
But I know another successful way of building is around runic and cooldown. Because runes are very useful, especially against like the Valkyries and such. So, how did you build your
I guess I was probably a little closer to the strength. I don't know if I really went one way or another. It's funny. I focused on luck more than anything, just because as someone who I'm always trying to optimize, like getting more experience in gold is like, of course. So I'm just going to build luck so that I have to work less later on. But like you said, you end up getting so much that ultimately you don't really need that stuff. Yeah. So I maxed out all my stuff pretty early on. The other thing that I didn't really key in on, and I don't think they did a great job explaining this, was the way your level works and how that levels with the enemies. Yeah. And it's based entirely on your gear. So the whole time I was like, I'm getting my stats and, luck and stuff, but my level I was on level 2 for probably over half the game. And so when I started coming across, especially there's a major part where like the world opens up and you can do a ton of side quests. And I got to that part and I was still on level 2 and I was running into these guys who were like level 5 and 6 and they were one-shotting me. I was like, what is going on? Like I get I'm on hard mode, but one-shotting me with just like these basic mobs, like these joggers that are like, what is going? So it wasn't until a little bit later that I figured out or realized that it's like, why do I have a level? Not why do I have a level, but what is this level doing and how does it affect things and stuff? So, and then I started because I wasn't buying new gear, I was like, why would I waste my money buying this gear that I know I'm going to get better stuff for later on? But I'm like, I probably should be doing that. So I kind of realized that, and it got a little bit easier for me in the second half of the game, partially just because I think you're stronger anyway, but partially because I realized that. But for the most part, I think I did a pretty good balance. Like, I remember putting a lot in strength, but I remember using a couple runes, all the time. But they were strength-based runes, or, that just... Yeah. Like, there was the one where you power your axe up. It's not a move in and of itself, but it powers your axe up, and then it allows you to, stagger enemies on almost every attack. It was super strong. It's such a strong way. So especially in boss fights and stuff, I would just be able to take down bosses, you do one parry or kind of get them in that little window of where it's good to get a couple attacks in, and I felt like I'd be able to take down a whole bar of their life or something in one little combo.
But yeah, I agree with you. The levels aren't ever really explained. So
Yeah.
the level, even though your level goes up, it doesn't mean anything to you as the user. All it means is if you're level 5 and you see a level 5 enemy, that means you're on the same level, right? Leveling up doesn't do much for you. It just lets you know, hey, your gear has gotten you to this level, right? Yeah. And so that's important. But I did use, so for my ice axe, my runes, I didn't change them too much. I used the one where it shoots out like that circle around you.
Yeah,
I used that one. And then the other one I used, I think, was where you underhand and the ice comes from the ground in a straight line.
Oh, I used that for a while too. I used all of them. As soon as I got a new one, I would equip it just to check it out. And if I didn't like it, I'd go back to something I liked. But I at least tried out everything I got. And I remember those, yeah.
Well, the reason I didn't really try everything out was because I had built around my attack thing that I wanted to make sure that I always had a way of clearing everything out around me.
Oh yeah.
And so I never wanted to get rid of that.
Yeah, I tried to keep my light runic attack kind of a pushback or
an
AoE or like crowd control, and then my strong runic attack be just pure, just like help do damage or a massive damage dealer. Or the power-up axe ended up working really well.
And then also, in terms of actual combat, especially against like the Valkyries and stuff, I never used anything other than the wolves for the...
I think those were my favorite, but again, I would switch anytime I got a new one, and I ended up with the boars were the last one you got, so I just kind of stuck with those for a while, and they were pretty good. I don't know if they were my favorite, but I got used to them, so I was afraid of changing them up because a lot of my combat was based like knowing what they did. But speaking to Atreus, I loved Atreus' role in gameplay and combat in this game. Like it was such a fun way to make him feel integral to the journey and to like your every moment to moment gameplay. Especially when you like, he would always be my priority. Anytime I got experience to power up, I would always level him his abilities up before I like leveled up most of my stuff. So his arrows are so strong, and like the runic attacks were really strong, and I got his gear. So I felt like when in doubt, all right, I could just kind of kite these guys for a while and just have them start picking guys off. And especially if they refresh, you get the refresh really fast perks on them and stuff. Like, he was able to do significant
That's basically
damage.
how I started taking down travelers, because those guys were annoying.
Oh, exactly. Right?
And they hit really hard, right? Yeah. And so I'd be like, stay away, just keep shooting.
Yeah, exactly. I could just kind of fight, and then occasionally there'll be a health thing that drops. You could kind of try to stay alive a little bit. But then especially with the stun arrows or lightning, where he'll kind of stun them, and then I go in for, like, I'll have my ice powered up, and I'll just, like, stun lock him even more, and it's just, like, really nice way to do massive damage to him. But again, just playing a little bit to the story too, just how much Atreus feels like it almost doesn't even feel like he's a side character. Like, you playing him
he's integral to combat.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll figure this out as you start going through the Valkyrie fights, but there are some Valkyries that have unblockable attacks.
Oh, you just gotta have him, like,
and you have to know when they're using it and have him use to interrupt.
That's really cool. Yeah.
So he's definitely very integral.
Yeah.
So another thing I did in combat I built around was stun, which is another reason why I always use the wolves, because they had the highest stun. Yeah. Because I love doing the stun finishes.
Yeah, the stun finish was nice. I mean, basically the one-shot kills, but I think that was one of those times, though, where because I had so many options, a lot of times I would forget I had those options, or, like, knowing which enemies it's more effective. Because some enemies, you, like, boom, stun them, that's the way to bring him down. That's the most efficient, optimal way. But other enemies, it was just like your fist did nothing, or the stun attacks didn't seem to really do a lot of stun. So, like, it was hard to know when to and when not to, like, to adapt that strategy for those enemies. So it was, usually I would just resort to my basic kind of tried and true axe stuff. I will say, too, it's interesting because when I first started playing, I went to the options and I changed it to the classic control style. So as much as I do think that this combat is a huge improvement from the previous God of Wars, to a little bit, it went back to me pressing square, 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 triangle. Because the way which is, I think, smart, they map the attacks to R1, L1, or R1, R2 in this game.
That's how I played.
Yeah, and I think how most people probably played, but in my mind, there was still too much of, like, this, like, subconscious thing where it's like, no, square and triangle should be attacked. So and they allow you to remap it to that, and I played the entire game that way, and actually a lot of it I did like that way anyway, because then R2 is Atreus' attack, and that trigger feels really nice as that ranged bow and arrow thing. But to a little bit, especially when you get the blades, it felt super like in the best ways, like because it's still not so wild and crazy and loosey goosey as the other God of Wars were. But when you get the blades, and I'm still pressing square, there's a little bit of that like kind of bleed through. I didn't mind it too. Like I said, I still appreciate this combat way more. But it was just kind of interesting how there's still a little bit of reminiscent of the previous games.
No, I really like that. So did you do a lot of stun finishers?
I did a fair amount. I think I got the labor. I finished the labor.
Did you ever finish that? Do it on one of those wolvers or whatever?
I think so.
Those
guys were a pain in the butt.
You like grab their lower jaw and you.
Oh, maybe
rip
I did
it.
too.
So yeah, you basically what Kratos does when he finishes them with the stun finisher is he grabs their lower jaw because they're like a dog, right?
Yeah.
So he grabs it and he rips it down. And it's the
most
most God of War. It's probably the most God of War thing in this game.
In the game,
and it pulls all the way down their body.
I did not do that because I would remember. It is funny because in the previous ones, like you got the centaur or whatever. There weren't so gratuitous moves in this, and even times when they could have, they actually purposely panned the camera off so you weren't seeing a lot of the gore happen on screen. Like it, and again, that takes a certain level of like a deft hand of maturity. Like, there's no reason we need to show this other than just appealing to like, oh my god, so cool, look at that, right? It's like, no, we're not going to show that.
Well, I mean, I do agree with you, but I will say, in comparison to the originals, at least the ones I played, I did appreciate that the combat felt a lot heavier.
Oh, yeah.
It felt heavier, so when I hit somebody, I felt like it was hitting them.
Yeah, there was a lot more weight, and that's what I mean, too, where everything felt more deliberate. Every action you did felt much more tied to your player, whereas before, you just like Max and like Kratos is doing all these crazy flailing things, but no, in this one, every button pressed, you know what is going to happen when you do it. And there's a lot of like, even the things like the axe throw felt really satisfying when it like would come back to you. There's a good satisfying schlunk, right?
Yeah.
When it comes back to your hand, right? So like, and it's a simple thing, but it's a really just like a fun, innovative way to kind of style the combat in a different way. Aside from combat, though, there's a lot of other gameplay, like the exploration I love. Like, I want to call it open world game. It's open world-ish. You said
it's hub and spoke,
right?
That's what it's called.
But all of the, like, I guess I would say that there weren't really, like, great puzzles, but they were just interesting enough to keep me, like, I just got to figure this out. I'll take an extra couple minutes to kind of, like, and a lot of it was just exploration and observant kind of style gameplay or environmental, like kind of like figuring stuff out.
Well, the biggest thing is finding like the ultra chests, right?
Yes.
That were locked by runes.
Yeah.
Those ones where you're just like, where the heck is that
and
last
it's just
rune?
like you walking around this space going, I know there's a rune, and that's it's a really fun, like a really good way for like you have all this intense combat that's super stressful, and then you have these moments of just like you having to observe your environment and just like taking it all in, and it's just again speaks to just like the dynamic nature of the game itself, that it's not just all one note, that they do a really good job of the full spectrum. And as a player, you really feel that you need those moments of tension relief where you're just like able to breathe and kind of observe, balanced with those more intense moments.
Yeah.
One thing too, I guess we could kind of touch on is that how much there is in this game. This game, the story alone, I didn't get everything, but I probably tried to beeline as much as I could through the story, and it took me 20 plus hours.
So there's two realms that are literally side content, right?
Yes.
There's Nifelheim,
which is like an arena tile area, so that's not too unfamiliar.
And then Muspelheim, which is combat challenges.
Or sorry, Muspelheim is the arena. Niflheim's the other. I haven't really done a lot of Niflheim.
Okay, so Nifelheim is like a time challenge for combat where you go into like this poison fog and you got to try to collect a certain amount of these items from within the fog and then get out before you freaking die, right? Yeah. And that one, so there's a lot to do there. And the combat challenges in Muspelheim also, there's a good amount of those that were eating up quite a bit of time. I've spent easily over, I think, 40 hours in the game.
And beyond just those, there's so much like fun collect. So there's like 50 artifacts, which they're like little treasures you find in the world, which are just kind of fun. They're nothing great, but there's a ton of lore. Like there's like these cool paintings or like wood etchings that you find, and each thing you find it builds into the history. But it's also a little side quest as you find stuff. There's all the other just like runes written around the world that you find.
Destroying
There's
Odin's eyes.
ravens that are hidden throughout the world. So stuff that is more or less familiar in terms of these kind of
the
style
world
games.
feels full.
Yeah, everywhere you go, it's like, oh man, I still have these ravens to find. I have treasure chests to open. I have these labors to do.
I have these dragons to release.
There's entire like side quests that in a game like this isn't traditionally filled with side quests, but there's actual full on sections of the game that you don't even have to go into, but they have all this content. More dragons with these huge monsters, but you don't even have to come across. You only have to come across one in the game, and there's I think three others. Two others.
Baldur was riding a dragon, so you're on that dragon there, and then there's the dragon that you save Sindri from.
But then also just like other side quests. But then beyond that too is things like Mimir's little lore. Any conversation that he has about some comment on the nature of some god or this realm or whatever is all added to your lore, and it adds to the world, and it's just a fun conversation to have the interaction there. And then the Valkyries too. Like the Valkyries are some of the funnest, like intense combat stuff, and they add a lot of lore too, right? Like I haven't finished it. Once you beat the queen, I think there's some like more story stuff that happens. Am I wrong about that? I've heard that there was some like not like an ending or anything like that.
Not a lot,
but a little tiny bit of more story stuff.
More.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, the whole time, just like if I wanted, I could spend hours and not even like play through, do some more story beats and just be completely entertained through. Just like there's these trolls I have to fight, or these ancient whatever they're called, the ancient elemental kind of things and stuff. Yeah.
Lots to do.
Lots of stuff
Lots to do.
So, anyways, yeah, God of War. If you haven't played it, highly recommend it. We hope that you had played it before you listened to this, because a lot of the fun and the appeal of the game was a lot of those surprises and the story and the discovery of all this stuff on your own. But if you had played it, hope we enjoyed the discussion. If you hated the game or you disagreed or you have other thoughts, let us know about it. It would be cool. It would be cool to hear what other people think of this game. Or maybe stuff that we did touch upon that you really loved. So yeah, comment on any of the places that you listen to us, or write us an email at yumchunks@gmail.com. Yeah, we're happy to hear about it. And if there's any other games that you really like or you might want us to talk about in the future, let us know about that too. We're probably going to do some more game episodes, but we tried it out this week, see how it went. So, anything else, Chris? Chris, what else is there to say? Boy. Be better.
Oh, that was... What is it? Is like, don't be sorry, be better.
Yes.
So yes, everybody take that to heart. Don't ever be sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Just be better.
Bunch of failures.
That's perfect. That is the perfect ending.